Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Thank you so much for joining tonight. We're going to be on for the next 30 minutes. If you have a question, please press 00 on the keypad on your phone. Jon Huntsman has a couple special guests on tonight. He'll introduce them. Questions are good for just about everybody on board here. So if you do have that question, press 00 on the keypad on your phone, and press 7 on the keypad on your phone if you wouldn't mind providing your email address so we can keep you up to date on matters. So it's 7 for email addresses and 0 for questions. I'm going to say this one more time. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Thank you again for joining us tonight. If you have a question, please press 00 on the keypad on your phone. And if you want to press 7, that'd be great. We're always trying to build up our email list. We want to do that if we can. That's 7 on the keypad on your phone. Jon Huntsman, why don't you start it off, please, if you wouldn't mind. We've got a good-sized audience already.
Kurt, thank you very much. It's a great honor to welcome our convention delegates, friends. It's an unusual time for all of us. Thank you for giving us a few moments tonight. I know everybody's busy. I'm coming to you live from the Huntsman home, where we've got 7 grandkids running around. I mean, I had to find a little corner where I could find a little bit of quiet. It's total chaos and pandemonium. So are we learning a little bit more in the way of patience, long-suffering, and love? As I mentioned to some the other night, I've always complained about not having enough family time with kids and grandkids. I don't know what to do now because I have so much. It's dropped on me in such rich abundance, but I'm loving every minute of it. So we're grateful for all of you who are participating as volunteers, as delegates. Thank you for it. You're doing it because you have great love for our way of life in a state that we love. And I'm truly grateful for that. You've got work that really begins to get serious this next week in a most unusual format, the way the convention is going to play out. So thank you for working with that, just like those of us who are running for office have had to deal with it. Everything has changed a great deal, so we're doing our best. This is not my preferred format. As you know, I've done a lot of cottage meetings and town hall meetings, and I love to look people in the eye. I like to shake hands. I like to hear from you. And this is the best we can do. And it's actually working out pretty well. So thank you for making it such. We have the great honor tonight of having a couple of my favorite people, our state senior senator, Mike Lee, and our running mate, Michelle Kafusi. Michelle, some of you have heard from already. I'm honored tonight that Mike is with us. Mike has been a close and dear friend for a lot of years. I plucked Mike, I'm going to say, from relative obscurity, Mike, but it really wasn't relative obscurity because you were a brilliant lawyer even back when you had maybe a little more hair, and brought him into the governor's office as our general counsel. And I grew to admire and respect Mike's intellect, his ability to define good conservative governance, and the rigor that he applied in so much of what we did when I was governor. And we've stayed very, very close ever since. And we confide in each other. And Mike's the kind of friend that, you might not have a lot like that in life, but I'm really delighted to have one like Mike who was close and honest and is changing our country in ways that is quite remarkable. And we're all very, very proud of Mike as a leader, as a father, and I'm particularly honored to have his endorsement. I don't take that lightly at all. It's before the primary, and I know when Mike stands up to speak, people listen. He is respected, and I am truly honored to have his support. So I thought what we would do tonight is we'd give Mike just a little bit of time to talk maybe about his new appointment on President Trump's task force on economic reopening, a little bit about what that might mean and the road ahead and anything else that Mike would like to say. And then what I'd like to do is just maybe open it up for some questions to either one of us at that point. And it would be a great honor then to proceed as outlined. So, Mike Lee, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thanks so much, John, and thanks to all of you who are joining us for this call. I appreciate your service as delegates. As John mentioned, the president has asked me to join his task force on reopening the economy. I spoke to him on the phone earlier today, along with some of my colleagues who have also been asked to participate. The president's very engaged in this and is very much of the mind that says that we have to protect the public, and we also have to acknowledge that this is not a binary choice between protecting human life and protecting the economy. The mode in which we find ourselves now is not one that's sustainable, not just from an economic standpoint, but it is also not sustainable in terms of sustaining human life. There are human costs in terms of life that come from shutting down the economy and having people stay at home indefinitely. So the president wants to make sure that we have a path toward doing that, a path that is orderly, a path that is safe, and a path that helps people recognize steps they can take to keep themselves and others as healthy and as safe as possible in these uncertain times. These uncertain times have a lot to do with why I think we're so fortunate to have an opportunity to elect Jon Huntsman as governor once again. When he spoke a moment ago about the fact that he had plucked me from relative obscurity, the only part of that I would quibble with is the word relative. He plucked me from complete obscurity. He and I didn't know each other before I worked for him. I had met him once or twice, and that's it. But I quickly developed profound respect for him, respect that has continued to this day, not only on a political level and a professional one, but a personal level. Jon Huntsman is someone I trust implicitly, and he's someone who the people of Utah have benefited from to a very significant degree. He is a conservative's conservative, and I say that with deepest respect and affection for him and the way he has always operated as a public official. When I worked for Jon Huntsman while he was governor, I learned that being a conservative means undergoing a rigorous political process with each and every decision that you make. It starts with kind of a checklist involving whether or not the proposed action is within the proper role of government, whether or not proposed action is within the proper role of the government in question. Is it state? Is it local? Is it federal? Or are there any constitutional impediments toward it? You'd be surprised at how rare and I believe how valuable that very trait is. And yet Jon Huntsman is someone who has that characteristic and that approach embedded deeply within him. And that's why I have such profound respect for him. To this day, the way I run my office, the way I decide whether to vote, is deeply influenced by the fact that I cut my political teeth as a member of Jon Huntsman's staff the last time he was governor. Jon Huntsman is also someone who has enormous respect and the trust of the President of the United States. President Trump likes and respects Jon Huntsman, not just because he's now been an ambassador from the United States to 3 different countries, and not just because he served as deputy U.S. trade representative, and also because in those roles and as serving as Utah's governor and filling 2 particularly difficult ambassadorial roles, one in China and one in Russia, he's someone who has learned how to reach out to people with very different backgrounds, with very different worldviews, to solve really complex problems and do so in a way that allows all involved to leave the situation feeling like they've been treated fairly and treated well. It's one of the reasons why I think he would work so well with the current administration and why we need his leadership right now more than ever, at a time when our state's economy and that of our entire nation and the planet is in such grave peril. It would be helpful at a time like this to have someone who can hit the ground running, who knows where the trouble spots are, and knows to whom he can reach out to bring Utah into the next century and to get Utah ready for the economic recovery that surely awaits us. With that, I look forward to discussing any questions you all may have and to proceeding with this conversation.
Thank you, Mike. With those kind words, I feel like I ought to just retire at this point.
Well,
We have Michelle Capuzzi with us as well. I just want to thank Michelle for the work that she's doing as mayor of one of the most important cities in the state. She has worked tirelessly. She's with first responders. She's with our modern day heroes, our medical and health professionals. And I just want to thank Michelle for the work that she's doing. It's absolutely incredible. And to have somebody like her with her leadership, her experience, her hands-on expertise, which has become even more pronounced in the last few weeks, and with an unbelievable family. I want to thank you, Michelle, for all that you're doing to add enormously to our ticket. And with that, Kurt, why don't we just go to questions?
We can do that. Let's take Jennifer first. Jennifer, welcome to our call. Jennifer, go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, thank you so much for both being here. And my question is for Senator Lee. I believe you said that Governor Huntsman is a conservative, yet others say he's not conservative enough. My question for you is, what conservative values do you think Governor Huntsman embodies?
Thanks so much for your question. I like that question because it helps emphasize Governor Huntsman's rare talent and the strength that he brings to the table. This is someone who understands that there is a tricky relationship between government power and individual liberty. Every time government acts, every time government expands its role, however incrementally, it does so at the expense of individual liberty. It doesn't mean government action is bad or should categorically be avoided, but it takes somebody who is able to recognize the trade-off that is involved and willing to look at constitutional restraints imposed both by the state constitution and its federal counterpart, with a healthy respect for those and also a healthy respect for the complex, interconnected web of public opinions surrounding any government action. One of the things that I love about him, and one of the things that causes me to regard him and revere him as I do as a conservative thought leader, is that he's not someone who takes his job lightly or who approaches any decision of any import with levity. He doesn't treat it as if it were easy, and that's exactly what you want in a governor, is someone who will wrestle over each and every significant decision that needs to be made. When I worked for him, he would review each and every piece of legislation that he was asked to either sign or veto. He would discuss each and every nomination, each and every policy coming out of his administration to make sure that it wasn't running afoul of any of these problems. Even though that should be the norm in government and politics, it's sadly quite rare. This is an individual who has it in great abundance. That is exactly why he's such a good conservative and why we need to re-elect him as our governor.
With that, let's do our first survey question, if we can, of the night. The current pandemic has resulted in significant spikes in unemployment. How concerned are you about Utah's economy and its impact on you personally? If you're very concerned, press 1. If you're somewhat concerned, press 2. No opinion, press 3. Somewhat unconcerned, press 4. Not concerned at all, press 5. How concerned are you about Utah's economy and its impact on you personally? Press 1 for very concerned, 2 for somewhat concerned, 3 no opinion, 4 somewhat unconcerned, or 5 not concerned at all. So, yes, let's get that answered if we can. We appreciate it. And then I'm going to read a question. We're going to take live questions in just a second. But Governor, this is from Philip. This is actually for both of you, I guess. What have you each learned from the other during the time you have known one another or worked together? This is from Philip.
Phil, thank you. I'll take a first crack at that. First of all, when you're working in the small confines of the governor's office, you begin to rely on each other's instincts. You trust one another. That's the only way you can get the work of the state done. And as Mike would participate in those meetings, it was clear that he had an exceptional grasp of governance, the appropriate role of government. And as I would sit and take, and I would term it taking tutorials from Mike, because Mike taught me a lot. You bring natural instincts and inclinations into a job, but they're further honed by the people that you work with. So whether it was looking at legislation that should be signed, whether it was choosing judges where Mike played an extraordinarily important role, or whether it was just defining the appropriate role of government, Mike was always there to talk about government being the servant of the people, and government that is closest to the people is always best. And I still remember Mike's lectures because I learned from them. He would talk about the vertical separation of power. You know, we always have a tendency to start at the top. This is a mistake that a lot of governors make. And they forget where most problem solving should occur, which is at the local level. It's always kind of a power grab. I think I can make a decision. I think I can drive it down from the top as opposed to coming organically from the people at the grassroots and working its way up. So you learn when you're sitting as governor that cities hate counties, counties hate the states hate the feds hate international organizations, and somehow partnerships have to be forged and maintained in all of that. So from Mike, my takeaway is the issues were around federalism. And let me just tell you why I think that's important, because I think we're entering a period of history where, because of the dysfunction in Washington, the inability to get big things done, and the coronavirus carryover, which is going to cripple, I think, a lot of our traditional mechanisms of government operations and management, we're going to be left to do more on our own. I think that's a good thing, because federalism is built for us. And whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's public lands, I think that is a good trend. And those lessons on federalism, on separation of powers, on the appropriate role of government, and even going as far as to say, and which government, because that has to be part of the overall governing conversation as well. Those were all important lessons that I learned from Mike. So as I look forward, particularly after listening to Mike again tonight on some of these issues, a partnership between the governor and Mike and members of our congressional delegation is going to be more important than ever before. So if we want to get movement on things like improving our payment in lieu of taxes, our PILT payments, which are pitifully low, we have an ability to maybe take a fresh look at that based on what Ken Ivory has done and others in terms of assigning a real value to some of those public lands. If we want to look at, the implications of the Antiquities Act of 1906 and how maybe we can get back some of our public lands, that's all hot air and talk unless you have a partnership with somebody like Mike in Washington and a president like President Trump who's open on these issues. So I not only look at what I learned from Mike and what I still carry with me, but I look to the future in terms of what may be possible with that working relationship going forward.
The most important single thing that I've learned from Jon Huntsman had to be the fact that there is a right answer whenever you're confronting any decision in government, any question of public policy. You have to proceed with the understanding that there is a right answer to that question. The fact that it may be difficult to find, the fact that whatever happens to be the right answer might be difficult to explain, it might be controversial with the public, doesn't excuse you as a public official from your obligation to find the right answer and to choose it and then to defend it. Jon Huntsman taught this not only in word but in deed. It's how he did the job, and it's such a big part of who he is and what makes him such a strong conservative leader is that foundational belief that he's not there just to put his finger to the wind and figure out what the public wants him to do. He's a believer in something Margaret Thatcher used to say. She would speak of an allegorical politician who would say, "Please show me where my people are going so that I might first go there and lead them." Jon Huntsman understands that that's not the role of the statesman. The true statesman is someone who understands that he's not just a delegate of the people, he is a trustee of the people, one who has to make difficult judgment calls, difficult decisions. To the extent that people don't agree with it right up front. It's the job of the elected public official to explain to the people why it is that it was the right decision. And that's an important part of who he is and why we need to elect him once again as our governor.
Thank you, Senator. The survey question we did before the current pandemic has resulted in significant spikes in unemployment. How concerned are you about Utah's economy and its impact on you personally? 52% very concerned, somewhat concerned 39%. It keeps moving up every time we do this poll. Jon Huntsman, what are your thoughts?
Well, you look at the red, and you look at where the red is today versus where it was 24 hours ago and 48 hours ago, and it just keeps creeping up, and it will be that way until we actually get back to work. Not the lights on immediately, but there must be a phased approach getting people back to work. There are bills to pay, there are obligations to meet, particularly with small business, and it's a number that makes perfect sense given the circumstances, unfortunately, that we find ourselves in.
Thank you. A quick question: if the state convention were held today, where would Governor Huntsman be on your ballot? First choice, press 1. Second choice, press 2. Third choice or lower, press 3. If the convention were held today, where would Governor Huntsman be on your ballot? First choice 1, second choice 2, third choice or lower 3. David's next. David, welcome to the call. David, go ahead with your question, please, from Farmington.
Hi, Governor Huntsman. What do you see as your or the governor's role after the pandemic's over in helping our economic recovery, and not just recovery, but our return to leading the nation in economic growth, a vital economy, and how could you enact that vision?
David, thank you for that. First of all, there will need to be a short-term economic program that begins to get us out of the hole. Now, let's imagine that we're successful in at least stabilizing ourselves, and we can move forward and look more to the longer term. Our market has always done well when we stick to the basics and we focus on economic liberty, which supports entrepreneurship and innovation. And looking forward, that means simply, what do we have to do as a marketplace to be seen as a safe haven? What do our taxes look like? What does the regulatory regime look like? What do our educational institutions look like? What kind of connectivity do we have with domestic markets and international markets? Because let's not forget that we have an enormously potent export potential here in this state. Agriculture relies a whole lot on the export sector. So going forward, I think we have an enormously powerful opportunity while everyone else is trying to figure it out and fix the mess that we're in, to be the first state out there to be able to broadcast a message of economic freedom, of a safe haven, of a state that will have its economic fundamentals right. And I think this will have significant implications for people not only staying within the market. So our goal should always be, are we keeping our kids and our grandkids who want to stay within the state, who want to make their dreams come true? Do we have enough opportunities to allow that to happen? Or are we exporting our kids, as has been a problem in years past? I would hope that when the history books are written, that phase after stabilization will say that Utah was seen by the world as the ultimate economic safe haven for economic freedom. People believed in its people, in its future, in its regulatory regime, and they came. And they stayed. So one of the implications of all of this will be probably a pretty serious disruption in China's trade flows because of the outright prevarications and lies they have told from the beginning of this whole pandemic. And it's going to cause a lot of investors in supply chains, which have become quite significant, put there by name brand corporations, to be disrupted. And these supply chain components, some of them quite sizable, research and development, manufacturing, whatever it might be, they're going to be looking for alternatives. And if we position ourselves the right way, I think we could see some of the most significant years for economic growth, just in terms of how the global economy reshapes itself. And as we position ourselves not just as the gateway of the West, which is what I was always raised believing about Utah, but rather as the gateway of the world and the crossroads of the world. I think that the years ahead should be nothing but optimistic in terms of growth and therefore the opportunities that we present our kids and our grandkids.
Thank you, sir. Quick last question. Again, if the state convention were held today, who would you vote for? Governor Huntsman, press 1. Someone else, press 2. If you're undecided, press 3. Press 1 for Governor Huntsman, 2 for someone else, 3 you're undecided. We appreciate it. Let's take another question. It's Mike from Linden. Mike, welcome to our call. Mike, go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, my question is for both Governor Huntsman first and Senator Lee second. We have had a number of incidents of shootings, and every time it happens, the Democrats in general and the liberals especially cry out for, let's run up our guns and take the guns away. My question is, what is your position about the Second Amendment and whether we should be holding on to our guns or giving them up?
Thank you for the question. I believe in support and advocate for the Second Amendment. It's enshrined in our Constitution, and it's something that I think most all in Utah believe in very strongly. I grew up shooting a BB gun at 6, a 22 at 12, and any number of weapons beyond that. I mean, with a name like Huntsman, how can he be anything but a shooter? And it's sort of part of what I was raised with, and so I'm familiar and comfortable with guns. I have a concealed carry permit. I'm comfortable with where the state is now with respect to its commitment to the Second Amendment, and that's what I will continue to do and be as governor.
We're going to get close to wrapping up, but before that, Senator, did you have any comment on Second Amendment before we go that way?
Yeah, I'll comment on that briefly. I think the first question you've got to ask when something like what you described happens is to ask the question, what will be the impact on the people subject to that law? What will it do to curb the activity of those bent on lawlessness as compared to what will it do on law-abiding citizens? If it'll do little or nothing to curb the behavior of criminals while putting additional burden on law-abiding citizens, chances are pretty good that for the same reasons you're eroding the Second Amendment. And in fact, the Supreme Court of the United States has correctly construed the Second Amendment along those lines, saying that it protects the right of the people to bear arms, the type of arms commonly used for lawful purposes by law-abiding citizens. And so that's the first and most important question to ask. And usually after one of these mass shootings, the answer is not that what we need is more government action. By the time one of those has happened, dozens of laws have been violated. The existence of another law isn't necessarily going to deter a criminal. That's a much more deeply rooted problem, one that can't simply be fixed with a Band-Aid of a gun control law.
We are running close to our finish line here. Jon Huntsman, have Senator Lee have some final thoughts, and then you finish right behind that if you would, okay?
Well, Kurt, I want to just maybe ask Mike a question of my own, if you don't mind.
Oh, you may.
Yeah, because we talked just a minute ago about a partnership between the governor and our senior senator and our delegation, particularly as it relates to public lands. And I think it'd be important to hear from Mike exactly how important is that and where he thinks that kind of relationship could go. If we have a reelected President Trump, if we have a strong relationship between the governor's office and our senior senator, what conceivably could we expect to have happen on some of these issues like the Antiquities Act, like regaining ownership of public lands? People have talked about it forever, but we have seen no movement or very little movement beyond that around monuments. So Mike, what conceivably could we expect in the years ahead with the right kind of partnership?
Look, with the right kind of partnership between the governor's mansion and those working in Washington, D.C., including at the Capitol and the White House, there's a lot that we could accomplish. I learned an enormous amount while working for you, John, about public lands. In fact, Jon Huntsman was kind of an early pioneer in the push for reform of federal public lands management. When I went to work for him, I developed a whole new vocabulary involving RS 2477 roads, involving the Antiquities Act, involving
how many maps did we have laid out on our desk every day?
More than I can possibly count. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about thousands of maps that we looked at, and Governor Huntsman was an early pioneer in pushing toward aggressive litigation of the state's interests in those roads. 2/3 of our land in the state of Utah is owned by the federal government. That makes things really, really difficult for us when we have to get a mother may I anytime we want to access that land. The fact is that we are a public land state. I, along with Jon Huntsman, hope and expect and believe that we can and we should and we will continue to be a public land state. But that doesn't mean that 2/3 of it needs to be owned and controlled by the federal government. Nor does that mean that when that happens that way, that there won't be real significant problems with doing that. It's one of the reasons why we elect Jon Huntsman as governor. In addition to pushing for legislation that would increase things, the PILT payment dedicated to the state, but also push toward transfer of management authority and in some cases ownership toward the state. Push for reform legislation to legislation like the Recreation and Public Purposes Act, which already allows the transfer of certain amounts of federal public land to occur to states for certain public purposes. I'd love to see that expanded to include options to provide for affordable housing in public land states like Utah. It'd be great to have a governor in the governor's mansion once again who would be willing and eager to discuss the fact that in our statehood enabling legislation passed by Congress before we became a state, there was at least an implicit understanding, if not a promise, that in time, garden variety federal public land within the state's borders, and I'm not talking here about national parks or about declared wilderness or national recreation areas. I'm talking here about your garden variety BLM public land. There's no reason why all that needs to be in the hands of the federal government and being managed by someone thousands of miles from those affected by this land. This ends up affecting Utah's poor and middle class and its public education system more than anyone else. Jon Huntsman understands these principles. He's willing to fight for them. With him in the governor's mansion and with me representing you in Washington, there's a lot we can do to put control of those public lands back in the hands of Utahns.
Mike Lee, thank you for your time and participating and for your terrific public service representing our great state. Good luck with President Trump's task force on economic reopening. May it happen sooner rather than later. I think I probably speak for everybody in that regard. My thanks to Michelle Kafusi for being on the line with us as well. And to all delegates, I know you've got serious business ahead. Thank you for giving us a little bit of your evening. Write in to us, Jon, Jon at huntsman2020.com, if you would like to talk about any of these issues. I've had the good fortune of being able to talk to many of you by phone personally. I always enjoy doing that as well. Thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for your service during this most extraordinary moment in our state and our nation's history. Thanks to one and all. May God bless the great state of Utah. Have a good evening.
I'm Jon Huntsman, and I approve this message.